Dum 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 da 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 da.
Last time on Re-Animator.
Brain death brings about an irreversible conclusion. We all want to retain our personalities in some idyllic afterlife. Perhaps, though, it takes Mr. West.
Second movie. We are now 5 years later in the real world, because the first movie was released in 1985, and the second was released in, I think, 89 or 90. So very nearly 5 years later. I don't know why it took so long to get a sequel, but, you know, sometimes things happen like that. And I actually have no idea how well the first movie did at the box office, but I imagine pretty good. And the budget wasn't that big either, so they must have had some kind of, you know, kick, a financial kick of some kind. Especially because you can definitely tell that the second movie has a better budget and better production values. For one, they have 5 different special effects studios working on the movie. I counted in the opening sequence because it's very obvious. They make a big deal out of showing all 5 names, like, yeah, this effects artist and this effects artist. It, however, doesn't mean that the effects are that much better this time. Select things do look better, but a lot of things just really don't. Anyway, enough of that. The movie itself. I watched the sequel a couple of days after I watched the first one. And honestly, on my first watching, I always had a kind of a hard time afterwards describing what it is the movie does. And I'm really not sure what I expected out of it, but the sequel, it kind of dumbfounded me for a while. But then I rewatched it again, and suddenly everything kind of made sense to me again. But I'm telling you, like my first viewing experience, I was basically like me going, there's an iguana. I love me some iguana. Nice. And Dan's hair got better, I guess. That's something. Yeah. But enough of that. Now to the chronology of the second movie with the best moments. So sit back and listen to the syntax. Let's go. So first of all, I love that Hill returns, the creep, and he gets the opening monologue, and he gets to do like a villain laugh. And I think it's very fitting for the movie's tone and fun, actually.
West! You bastard!
The movie, weirdly enough, does not open up in Miskatonic. We are instead told by text that it is 8 months after the events of the first movie, and we are in Peru, where we meet Dan and Herbert in a war zone, where they are, I guess, doing volunteer medical. Like, I think they tried to explain it as like, oh, they're, you know, doing their duty as doctors in training, going out to a war zone to help out. I think of it as the hospital after the massacre in the morgue. They were like, we need to send you two away for a while. We can't have the media coming around here knocking on our door every other second because of you guys. So why don't you fuck off to Peru for a couple of months, and then maybe we'll see if we can forgive you. So still doesn't explain how apparently Dan and Herbert are doctors now, and they got their PhDs in the last 8 months. Apparently, even though it's explained in the first movie that they are third-year med students, it's like the movie doesn't even try. Ding! Plot hole, ding. Am I right? Herbert picks up this iguana they have in the camp, and he points it at Dan, and he goes, "Look at this! Look at this!"
Look at this.
While bombs are flying around Dan and Herbert's ears, Herbert has time to do like a we will create new life speech.
This is no longer about just reanimating the dead. We will create new life.
Herbert, this is not the time nor place. It's this same exact moment where Dan and Herbert have to get out of there as fast as possible. And Herbert only has time to pack the iguana, so he says, we'll need this back home. And he just puts it into a bag.
We'll need this back home.
The iguana becomes important later for some reason, if you'll believe it. When Dan and Herbert are escaping the war, Herbert has to shoot someone and he makes this really goofy shooting face. And it's just definitely like a Jeffrey Combsy thing to do, and that's why I love him so much. Oh, and before they get out of there, Dan manages to get violently stabbed by a person in the war, I guess from the opposing side that invade the camp. He gets very much stabbed, and there is absolutely zero follow-up to this. It's just him and Herbert get out of the war zone, and we cut back to Massachusetts. No problem. I do like to nitpick. I don't want anyone to think that I'm being serious about like these kind of details don't really impair my viewing experience or my enjoyment. It's the kind of stuff that, rolls around in my head when I get to sort of fixating on details a little too much. So it's just this weird feeling of like, why did they make these choices? Like, what does this really mean? We're back at the Miskatonic Hospital, and we see Dan and Herbert with a patient, Gloria. I'm a little disappointed that Dan turns out to be not a very ethical doctor. He's getting like way too chummy with Gloria, and it's not explained. Like, it would have been nice if they just said, oh, Dan knew Gloria, they went to school together or whatever, so they're good friends or something, and he always had a crush on her or something, and that's why he's like, cozying up a little too much to her. But no, it's just like, it's just another patient for him, and Dan is just such a caring doctor that he flirts with his patients when they're dying. Yeah, no, it's not great. I know it's hard to talk about unethical doctors when Herbert is right there in the room. So, anyone else will obviously always look worse in comparison. But seriously, Dan, what the hell? Okay, so new character introduction. There's a guy, Lieutenant Chapel.
Time for more corrections. So for some reason, and it's really embarrassing to think about it now, but I keep calling the cop in the movie Lieutenant Chapel, and it turns out, as I learned from reading the credits, that his name is Lieutenant Chapham, not Chapman, not Chapel, Chapham. Fuck it if I knew. The problem is that no one in the movie ever says his name besides himself, and the way he talks is so mumbled, and I know I'm digging a little too much on the cop, I know, but I have to blame someone other than myself for getting his name completely wrong throughout the entire video. So I'm sorry about that. You hear me say Chapel, just ignore it.
And he baffles me. He's this cop who's going around investigating Herbert and Dan because he's like, what happened at the Miskatonic massacre 8 months ago? It's this guy's fault. I have to follow this guy Herbert around. But there's something really weird about Lieutenant Chapel, and I don't know if it's the direction or the actor himself who's doing this, but he, for some reason, for many parts of the movie, he's like talking in slow motion, and I don't get it at all. Like he's like smiling creepily all the time, and when he's talking, he's like making way too many pauses and stops, and it's just like,
what do you want to know, Mr.
Lee Chapman, Arkham Police. Lieutenant. I'd like to talk to you about him.
It's driving me nuts. I don't get it. We see another pathologist at the hospital, Dr. Graves, which is, oh my god, so funny. He's named Graves and he's a pathologist. He's given like a package, which is Hill's decapitated head, which in the last movie got squashed like a grapefruit. So it's really weird that he survived that. But his head is back at the hospital now. And Dr. Graves is like receiving the head, and he's told that the head was found randomly at a sideshow.
It showed up at a carnival sideshow just outside of Arkham.
Which is such a fun detail to like do a sort of callback to Herbert's comment about Hill going to a sideshow to be a freak in a circus.
Get a job in a sideshow.
I think that's good. Graves, the pathologist, is describing the death of a ballet dancer, and for some reason he finds it very amusing.
Would-be ballet dancer didn't have the stuff, cut off her feet and bled to death.
And then he says, "Who'd want to steal body parts?" And then cut to Herbert.
Who would want to steal body parts?
Ooh, why do I keep kicking the camera? I'm sorry, this continuity is going to be all over the place. Just like this movie. There's my knee, and I'm slapping it. Oh, I'm wearing my non-performance pants. God damn it. And my loafers. Sorry that you had to see that. Herbert is walking around the evidence room that has all the body parts from the massacre in the last movie. And he finds Hill's head, and then he starts talking to him, even though, you know, at this point, Hill isn't reanimated yet. He's going to be later in the movie. But right now, he's just a decapitated head that isn't alive. And Herbert is just having a whole conversation with him because he's such a fucking weirdo. And I like that.
What do you think of the location of the will in the brain now, Dr. Hill? I'm sorry, what was that?
Oh, and little acting detail. I love it when Jeffrey Combs, he like tilts his chin up a little to look more intimidating. He does this thing, I swear to God, where he like tilts his chin up a little bit. And I like that about him. Jeffrey Herbert is he's got a severed arm in one hand and he uses to smack Hill's head. Nice one, Herbert. Really good one. Herbert is on such a roll with the puns. He goes, "You're nothing but a dead head." And no body.
You're nothing but a dead head. A no body.
You can really tell that Herbert has been dying to use that line on Hill if he ever saw his head again. So he's had 8 months to think of a comeback, and there it is. So a couple of things are different from the last movie. Dan and Herbert are still living together, but they have now upgraded to a decommissioned funeral home that is near a graveyard. So it's like extra spooky. Dan comes home and he's like walking around the house looking for Herbert. He, of course, goes down to the basement and Herbert spooks him by sticking out of the wall and laughs at him because he likes pranking Dan. And it's like that meme. It's like that. I don't even want to say it, but I also do want to say it. It's like that meme. Oh, damn, Herbert, you stuck.
Damn, stepsister, you stuck?
Dude, I actually can't get out.
The iguana comes back, and Herbert presents it to Dan once again, and I love that. And this detail, I don't get it, is like, Herbert has taken the iguana out to show Dan something, and Dan, like, slams the iguana cage door for no reason. Dan, the iguana is already out. What are you doing? Herbert is formulating some reagent, and I like that he's like sticking his tongue out a little bit while he's doing it because he's so concentrated. He looks a bit like a cat that's gotten its tongue stuck. Oh, and he shows Dan that he can assemble like body parts and reanimate them without having to have a body or a brain for it.
Dr. Hill gave me this idea.
And he assembles this, I call it the finger baby, while he's chuckling because he's being such a little freak about it. He's having so much fun making these abominations of nature. And Dan is so done with him. This is also the scene where he's like, Herbert, I'm moving out. I can't take it anymore.
I'm moving out. What?
Oh, he says to Herbert, this morbid doodling with body parts. He can't take it anymore. Oh.
This morbid doodling with human body parts.
Oh, and it's in this scene that Herbert brings up Meg and strikes a nerve with Dan.
I didn't see you rejecting my work when Meg was lying there dead. Where were your great ideals then? Don't you?
It would have been a perfect opportunity for the movie to mention what happened to Meg, but they decided not to. They straight up just thought, no, we don't want to explain what happened to her. Never mind that she had been injected with the reagent, and as we will see in this movie, any of the other corpses from the last movie that were injected with the reagent are still alive, so to say, like walking around and, being reanimated corpses. So why it didn't work on Meg, they could have literally made up any explanation for it. They could have said, Meg was, so pure of heart that her body rejected the serum, or I don't know, it just didn't work for her. And it's like the painful tragedy of Dan trying to reanimate the one person he loves and whom he needs to, keep alive. And she's the only person that it doesn't work on. And she stays dead because of it. They could have done anything with it. And instead they choose to do nothing. And that's my main problem with this movie. Ding! I keep kicking the camera. Oh, I hate myself. So yeah, I just really wish they would have gone literally anywhere and said just a little bit something about Meg and what happened to Meg, but they choose not to. And it's just gonna annoy me forever. Meg deserves better, is what I'm saying. So what Herbert was doing back at the hospital is he found Meg's heart, which was apparently cut out and put in a separate evidence bag, and has, not decomposed in the last 8 months. Movie magic. And he takes it home with him and he presents it to Dan. So he literally gives Dan a heart. And I feel like it's a direct parallel to that one scene from Hannibal. Where have I seen that before?
Meg's heart.
He sent you his heart.
I read an essay about the Re-Animator franchise, and it mentioned that the second movie is basically Herbert saving his and Dan's marriage by proposing that they make a baby. Because that's the whole plot of the movie, is that Herbert says, we can, make a new Meg with her heart. We can, make body parts into a bride, and we can, keep her forever, I guess. I feel like maybe Herbert never read Frankenstein, so he never learned a lesson. It's Herbert that says, it's kind of like a throwaway comment. He says, the police would never come here. And then ding dong, it's the police at the door.
What about the police? Oh, the police will never come here.
Dan goes to answer the door, and Herbert in the basement realizes that the finger baby has escaped. So he looks around the basement while he's having internal panic brewing inside of him. The cop at the door is, of course, Lieutenant Chappell, back for more conversation in slow motion.
Daniel Kane?
Yes? Police.
He is just kind of interrogating and intimidating Herbert. But meanwhile, the finger baby has escaped into the living room where they are. And it's scuttling around. And Herbert and Dan are trying to look at it while listening to what Lieutenant Chappell is talking about. So they're really trying hard to not, make it known that there's a weird abomination in the living room, but while they still have to try and stop it, and it's so funny. So Herbert and Dan now have to find some body parts from some women that are recently dead. So they go to the morgue again, and this time they pull a Weekend at Bernie's, and they, get this corpse and put it in a wheelchair and put some sunglasses on it, and it's like, done. No one will ever suspect that that's a dead person in a wheelchair. And no, I haven't seen Weekend at Bernie's, but from context clues, I can gather that it's about some guys that have to pretend that a corpse is alive. So they take this dead guy around with them, I guess. I think Dr. Graves brings back Hill's head because he found some reagent serum in the evidence. And after Graves brings Hill back, the first thing Hill does is criticize him.
Your theory of reconciling creationism with the origin of disease. Yes. Totally idiotic.
He never learns, huh? Back to Dan and Herbert trying to escape the hospital with a corpse. They run into an old acquaintance that they met at the war zone, Francesca. And Dan immediately oh, Francesca, it's you again. And you just know that something bad is going to happen between them. And Herbert knows that too, because he goes up to Dan and he says, "Don't let the little head rule the big head, Dan."
Don't let the little head rule the big head, Dan.
Can I just say, Francesca is very cute. She's so sweet. I like when she says, "I hope you like garlic."
Hope you like garlic.
That was nice. I appreciate her. She doesn't deserve what's coming to her in the rest of the movie. Like all women in these movies. So what happens is Dan invites Francesca over for some pasta. And they're, making food and whatever. And then they just abandon the pasta sauce to go and have sex, I guess. Meanwhile, Herbert is playing in the basement, and he's doodling again with body parts. And he puts a foot on an arm, and the director's foot fetish rears its ugly head yet again. And while Herbert isn't really paying attention, he gets knocked down to the ground by this foot kicking him in the face. And there's this shot that I cannot explain. So Dan and Francesca are boning still. It's taking forever for them. And apparently their door is open because there's this this juxtaposition between a cut of Dan and Francesca, basking in their sexiness, and then cut to Herbert looking at them jealously. He stands there looking like a villain. I don't get it. What were they trying to say? I have even more corrections from the latest future. And this time it's because of this scene where I apparently completely forgot about it because I was too busy laughing at my own jokes, apparently. Remember in the first video how I said that Herbert doesn't exhibit any feelings of vulnerability for the rest of the franchise? Well, I was wrong again, because in this scene, it is subtle, but what happens after Herbert has been, intruding on Dan and Francesca is that he walks down the stairs to the basement and just walks slowly and deliberately, and he sort of holds his hand to his heart, holding his tie presumably, but really what he's doing is holding his hand to his heart, and he looks hurt. And that's when it struck me. I mean, the thesis of the film is that Herbert wants to create a woman to keep Dan interested in keeping up their research. And you could say that Herbert feels threatened by anyone else in Dan's life encroaching on him, because Herbert is inherently so morbidly jealous of anyone who is in his way of him and Dan, so to say. It's a more subtle kind of vulnerability, but you can really tell in this scene that this is Herbert realizing that he's losing Dan, and he really does have to do anything he can at all to keep Dan here with him. I can't believe I missed that one, but it's very poignant, for lack of a better word. I mean, you gotta give it up for Jeffrey Combs for being able to give us the range of being over the top and dramatic and hammy, and also doing subtle, very understated performances like this, where you don't necessarily know what it is Herbert is going through in this moment, in this scene, but you can tell that he is feeling some kind of hurt, and he's actually exhibiting human vulnerability. And I think that's just a very good touch and a very nice addition to the movie. Because otherwise, it would just been Herbert running around being kind of an asshole the whole time, and yeah. So it really did need that, and I'm glad they included it. Anyway, I hope you can't hear the tractor in the background, but if you can, then that's just my dad again. That's what all I wanted to add, is that just, it really, it hit different when I rewatched it again, this one scene, and I finally understood what they were going for. So Lieutenant Chapel makes his way into the house again and down to the basement, where he of course sees Herbert's horrible experiments. And Herbert gets shoved like a nerd getting shoved into his locker by a jock. It happens again that it looks for just a moment like Lieutenant Chapel is going in for the kiss. It's Dean Halsey and Dan all over again. What's going on? I thought that it was a movie about straight guys. So Lieutenant Chapel goes shovel crazy on Herbert, and Herbert gives him the old unaliving treatment. And then Dan goes down to the basement, and he is immediately angry with Herbert, because he's like, not this again! Why do you keep killing people when I explicitly told you not to, Herbert?
He attacked me.
No, Dad!
Herbert, who is just like a single person accident that keeps happening over and over again, he decides to reanimate Lieutenant Chapel. And Lieutenant Chapel goes mad, of course, because that's what happens with every single fucking person who gets reanimated. Because we learned earlier that Lieutenant Chapel probably killed his wife. Herbert says this line, he says, "He's a wife beater, Dan, use the gun."
He's a wife beater, Dan, use the gun!
This is Felix's favorite line from the movie, and I totally get why. I also quote it on a daily basis. It's so funny. It shouldn't be funny, but it is. In this whole kerfuffle with Lieutenant Chapel, Dan manages to lose his shirt for absolutely no reason, and it's not like it's not supposed to. It doesn't add anything that he becomes shirtless. It's really just gratuitous. Not that I'm complaining. Wow. Chapel kills the dog that I forgot to mention earlier. Francesca has a dog, and he like tears off one of the dog's legs, and it's kind of horrifying. But Herbert immediately, his first thought is to take the dog, reanimate it, stick an arm onto the missing leg. You just never quit, do you, Herbert? You never know when to quit. Understandably. Francesca is upset by this. And she decides to call Dan a freak for hanging out with Herbert. And then Herbert goes, "You're better off without her."
You're a freak! God, I hate you!
You're better off without her.
Another thing I wish I had mentioned while I was filming originally is that in this scene where Herbert brought back the dog, he's wearing like a bluebell apron. That's so cute. And it's just like nowhere in the movie otherwise is he wearing that plastic apron. And I thought that was a very nice detail. I thought it was Let's bring in.
So back at the hospital, Dan is talking to Gloria. And by talking to Gloria, I mean he talks at her. Because she literally doesn't get a word in before flatlining out of nowhere. And the best part is that Dan is so caught up in, like, being creepy with her that he doesn't notice that she's flatlining for a couple of seconds. Oh, and he says this line that really does not sit right with me. He says, "It helps me to think of you as Meg who lived."
It helps me to think of you as Meg who lived.
Dan, I don't like this. And you know what happens whenever there's a character that flatlines in Dan's vicinity is that he has to do CPR on them, and he does so badly. And yes, she dies. We cut to a scene where Hill's reanimated head, it opens the scene with him, I guess, having like a brain gasm.
Damn you, West!
I'm having a harder and harder time explaining the events of this movie. It's implied that Hill has the powers to summon Chapel to him, which is weird. Like, I get how it's implied that he summons the other reanimated corpses from the last movie that are still around. But how is he connected to Chapel? Like, that doesn't really make any sense. I also have not explained this at all, like how he has a sort of mental connection to the other reanimated corpses. It makes sense if you watch the other movie. I swear to God, I can't explain everything, can I? Graves gets fed up with Hill, and he stuffs an apple in his mouth and then wraps him in a towel and just throws him in a bin. And I guess he like assumes that that's enough, and he doesn't like take the bin out, throw him in the garbage, throw him in a fireplace, nothing. He's just like, yeah, you sit there for a while and I'll see how it goes. And of course that comes back to bite him in the ass later. Herbert is back down at the morgue, and there's a weird morgue assistant. I don't think we ever get his name. His only contribution to the movie is that he asks Herbert if Gloria, who just died, if she was hot, and Herbert just ignores him.
Was she good looking, Doc?
Which is finally something that I would have also done if I was Herbert. Herbert has finally found all the parts for the bride that they are constructing. And it's just horrible, this scene where he like goes through all her body parts. He's like explaining them to Dan because all the body parts have a story. So he's like, the feet of the ballet dancer. And by the way, the feet. He's fondling the feet again. I have to call the police. It honestly bothers me a lot, the scene where he's like going through the body parts. And yeah, great. It's really super important to know that Herbert cares that like the legs are from a sex worker. And it's, but, interesting, the womb is that of a virgin's.
You remember the hooker who was killed in ER by her pimp last week? Think of all the bodies these legs have wrapped around. The womb of the virgin, struck down before tasting the pleasures of life.
This movie was written by some guys and some dudes. And I don't like it. I mean, I don't like it when they do stuff like this. You could have stopped right there, and you could have just not done that at all, and that would have been great. Herbert does say one thing that is really funny. When he picks up one of the hands, he says, "The lawyer's hand. Case dismissed."
The lawyer's hand. Case dismissed.
I think he really likes puns and bad jokes. I think that's Herbert's thing, that he just really likes that. And I respect that about him. But there is a really weird detail that I'm really not sure how it makes sense at all, which is when Herbert's going through creepily the parts of the bride, at one point he says, the skin, so soft, so warm, or something like that. Like he's paraphrasing something that Dan said earlier when he was boning Francesca.
Your skin's so soft. So warm.
Your skin, so soft, so warm.
How would Herbert have known that? Wait, except that it does make sense because Herbert was watching them. Anyway.
Time for more additions. So in this scene where I was so creeped out by everything Herbert is doing, basically, it is weirdly undercut also by this shot of him, like, sexily fidgeting with a wire. I don't know what that was about. That was a little too much for my little heart. And there's not really any point to it, except to make him look a little villainous, I guess. Or something else. I don't know. Anyway, this has been Corrections. Back to the video.
A detail is Dan, he puts on some latex gloves and he does it a little forceful.
Good.
That's it. The final scene is coming to a head where the bride has been reanimated and Francesca shows up. The other reanimated corpses that Hill summoned shows up. There's a scuttling sound behind the walls in the basement. And it's implied that there's something terribly wrong inside of them because, as it turns out later, Herbert has done a bunch of failed experiments on like reanimated body parts, and he has just like shoved them into the wall instead of doing something about them. And so it's like foreboding that they're like making noises and scuttling around. And Herbert yells at the wall to like get them to shut up, I guess. And he calls them little boogers.
Sounds like rats in the wall.
Rats. Yes. That's what it is.
The little buggers better stay put or I'll...
I love in this whole scene that Dan is wearing a shirt that makes him look like a dashing rogue. I respect that costume department very much for that. In an earlier scene, Hill forced Dr. Graves to help him enact his revenge, and he does so by getting Graves to graft on a pair of bat's wings onto Hill's head. Because, if you will believe it, it enables Hill to fly around. But that's not all, because Hill's brilliant plan includes shipping himself in a crate to Dan and Herbert's house on the off chance that Herbert opens the door and brings the crate inside the house, opens up the crate, and lets Hill fly out of it. So Hill was really relying on Herbert being curious and stupid enough to fall for that trick. And he did. I have a question for the makeup department. Why is the bride's hair all teased up in like a crow's nest? It's a weird choice because there's not really any indication for why her hair should be like huge and puffy. It's not like they reanimated her with electricity, which, I mean, it doesn't really make sense to begin with, but in terms of movie logic, it doesn't make sense. Ding! Okay, so Herbert, he's doing like a victory speech after they've reanimated the bride, and he's like making this huge speech about God and life and death, and he's making these Jeffrey Combs certified faces and gestures. And I like to call Jeffrey Combs' overacting combing the scenery, because, get it? It's like chewing the scenery. but his name is Jeffrey Combs. Movie's almost over. Too many things to explain. What happens in the very climax of the movie is that the bride, who has been like reanimated for about 15 minutes, rips out her own heart and rips herself apart, basically. And it's so metal. It's honestly a really cool effect. So kudos for that. And while she is like ripping her own body apart, Herbert says, "Make a note of it, Dan."
Make a note of it, Dan!
Oh, he really doesn't know when to stop, does he? Anyway, so Hill's head has kind of been hidden in the shadows up until this big reveal right at the very end of the movie. And we see his like head flying around in all its early green screen glory, and it's just such a terrible effect, and it's perfect. You could say that Carl Hill comes back as Batman. So all those reanimated rejects in the wall break free, and chaos completely ensues. And it is also a lesson in hubris, I guess, for Herbert. And what happens in the very, very end of the movie is that Herbert is seemingly buried alive in the basement because the walls come tumbling down on him and all of the corpses, as well as Hill's head. But of course, Herbert survives into the next movie, and it is never explained. Once again, never explained. Love that. The thing is, once I started thinking about it, I have a theory that maybe the reason why he keeps surviving these situations is because him injecting the reagent and being addicted to it has actually made him invulnerable. Could that be a possibility? Is all I'm saying. That like it has the effect he wants to achieve if you take the reagent while you're alive. So that's how he keeps surviving these ridiculous situations. It's the only explanation I have for it. So anyway, the second movie, it's great, honestly. I do think it's quite a good follow-up. It's not that often that movies have sequels that are as energetic and still like capturing the same energy and same tone and the same, I guess, the motivations of the first movie. So I quite like that they kept up the energy and they kept up the fun and the comedy. So I say, good job on that one. Next movie is going to be quite different because of a lot of reasons, as you'll see. So see you in the final video. Bye.